young man, who is sort of full of angst and so on. But I think it is so much more than that, and we need to be, we need to look at that for a moment. I will in a minute. Sorry, I need to keep having water because I'm speaking a lot. Bear with me. The start. Now you see, I want you to please make a note of a word, semiotics, the science of signs, because a lot of readers do not bother with the semiotics which they are confronting in a novel. Every novel, every piece of writing has its own sign system. It does its own signposting, and it's telling you where to go, what to look for, and so on. And this is very important when you read a novel, any piece of a good piece of writing, which has layers, and as this does, which has layers and layers of meaning to it. And then also kind of linking kind of Copperfield with Salinger is an exciting kind of thing to be doing. But I'll read you some of this because I think it's so very exciting. I think it's a masterpiece. It's magnificent. There's a savage indignation here, which I think is so wonderful. It's so rare because very few people can write like Salinger. It's so utterly confrontational. No novel that I can think of is quite so confrontational. If you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born and what my lousy childhood was like, and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me, and all that David Copperfield kind of crap. So I will point out here because I think it's worthwhile. Somewhere a stand has been taken instantly against literature, against written writing, against literary writing. This is a clear stand taken against literary writing, self-conscious literature, which is posing somewhere. This is what comes across later, even more clearly, as literature. So that's been demolished as far as Salinger is concerned in the first sentence. But I don't feel like going into it if you want to know the truth. In the first place, that stuff bores me. And in the second place, my parents would have about 2 hemorrhages apiece if I said anything pretty personal about them. They're quite touchy about it. They're quite touchy about anything like that, especially my father. They're nice and all. I'm not saying that, but they're also touchy as hell. Besides, I'm not going to tell you my whole goddamn autobiography or anything. I'll just tell you about this madman stuff that happened to me around last Christmas, just before I got pretty run down and had to come out here and take it easy. I mean, that's all. That's all I told DB about, and he's my brother and all. He's in Hollywood. That isn't too far from this crummy place, and he comes over and visits me practically every weekend. He's going to drive me home when I go home next month, maybe. He just got a Jaguar, one of those little English jobs that can do around 200 miles an hour. It cost him damn near 4,000 bucks. He's got a lot of dough now. He didn't used to. He used to be just a regular writer when he was home. He wrote this terrific book of short stories, The Secret Goldfish. In case you've never heard of him, the best one in it was The Secret Goldfish. It was about this little kid that wouldn't let anybody look at his goldfish because he'd bought it with his own money. It killed me. Now he's out in Hollywood, DB, being a prostitute. If there's one thing I hate, it's the movies. Don't even mention them to me. I will break off here and say we have referred here, Salinger has referred here to a hack writer and hack writing, which is what I was talking about. Because Salinger's taking a stand against not just literary writing, sophisticated literature, but also against hack writing, because he's referred to the brother as this kind of prostitute, as prostitution, which is what the sophists, whom Plato attacked throughout his life, Socrates attacked throughout his life, and Plato in the dialogues was also doing. Okay, there's a sort of constant battle between the sophists, the men of the market, if you like, the publishers, the agents, the whole, and the artist. There is this kind of thing, the philosopher, the true artist, as opposed to the hacks. When I want to start telling, where I want to start telling is the day I left Pensy Prep. Pensy Prep is this school that's in Agenttown, Pennsylvania. You probably heard of it. You've probably seen the ads anyway. They're advertised in about 1,000 magazines, always showing some hotshot guy on a horse jumping over a fence. Like if all you ever did at Pensy was play polo all the time. I never even once saw a horse anywhere near the place. And underneath, the guy on the horse's picture, it always says, since 1888, we have been molding boys into splendid, clean-thinking young men, strictly for the birds. They don't do any damn more molding at Pensy than they do at any other school. And I didn't know anybody there that was splendid and clean-thinking and all. Maybe 2 guys, if that many, and they probably came to Pensy that way. Anyway, it was the Saturday of the football game with Saxon Hall. The game with Saxon Hall was supposed to be a very big deal around Pensy. It was the best game of the year, and you were supposed to commit suicide or something if old Pensy didn't win. I remember around 3 o'clock that afternoon, I was standing way the hell up on top of Thompson Hill, right next to this crazy cannon that was in the Revolutionary War and all. You could see the whole field from there, and you could see the two teams, bashing each other all over the place. You couldn't see the grandstand too hot, but you couldn't hear them all. But you could hear them all yelling deep and terrific on the Pensy side, because practically the whole school, except me, was there. And Scrawny and Faggy, what's this word? Scrawny and Faggy on the Swan Hill side, because the visiting team hardly ever brought many people with them. Now, this is very important for you, sir, also, because it is a monologue. But he is doing something incredible. He's writing through the persona of a young man who is disenchanted with life, but there's so much more than disenchantment. There is now again, I'm reverting to the word semiotics. If you look at the signs here, the signs, this comes clearer as we go on in the novel. The game being played is the game of life. It's about the system. It is about the system. He's attacking, he's not part of the system. He's making that abundantly clear. This football game and the Revolutionary War, the whole American perspective, it's an anti-establishment stand he's taking. And this is, again, very important to note. And I think it's what, I don't know if those who read it would, I think, appreciate what I'm trying to say, because there's so much more beneath the kind of surface meaning. There's a lot happening within the novel, much, much deeper than what comes across as the kind of, monologue of an alienated adolescent here, sure.
Basically think, when you read that, you tend to chuckle all the time. And when you chuckle, I mean, you really get it. I mean,
well,
everybody gets quite a bit.
Comedy is, again, something that engages the reader at once. And chuckling is you chuckle. No, but you must not be just chuckling. You must be kind of taking in what he's saying about the system, about the fakeness, the phoniness of the system. I'm just going to read you a little more because this is important. There were never many girls at all at the football games. Only seniors were allowed to bring girls with them. It was a terrible school, no matter how you looked at it. I like to be somewhere at least where you can see a few girls around once in a while, even if they're only scratching their arms or blowing their noses or even just giggling or something. Old Selma Thurmer, she was the headmaster's daughter, showed up at the games quite often, but she wasn't exactly the type that drove you mad with desire. She was a pretty nice girl, though I sat next to her once in the bus from Town and we sort of struck up a conversation. I liked her. She had a big nose and her nails were all bitten down and bleedy looking. And she had on those damn falsies that point all over the place, but you felt sort of sorry for her. What I liked about her, she didn't give you a lot of horse manure about what a great guy her father was. She probably knew what a phony slob he was. Now, the whole book is about phonies, about false people, but it's not just phonies. It is, Salinger's take is a very profound one. He's taking on the world, he's taking on falsehood, period. The falsehood he sees around him in many different shapes and forms. And he sees the world in which he lives, the school he's at, Pensy Prep. It's all utterly, utterly phony. He's even actually demolishing the business of education as being not just elitist, but as being fake and of no account and of no use, because somewhere, and keeps on using the word truth, by the way. He keeps on using, if you want me to hear the truth, this is his way of saying there is this commitment to the truth. He is actually, what he is doing is spelling out his commitment to Socratic truth. The word for it is aletheology. Alethes means true. He is spelling out his commitment to aletheology. There is this incredible Socratic stance taken, also a Buddhist stance. Also a Buddhist stance, because we see in a little while, after what I've read out, he goes to see this old man who's sort of kind of about to probably die. But as you remember, in the case of Buddha, because Salinger was known to have been involved in Buddhism very deeply. And so there's this confrontation, this engagement with Buddhism as well, the Buddhist experience, with old age, with sickness, with death, and so on. So it's all about, and with time he talks about wondering where the ducks go. It's very, very beautiful, where the ducks go in the winter in Central Park. And he wonders whether they're taken away to a zoo or where they go when it freezes up. So there are these sublime moments in Salinger, and I do recommend to those of you who have not read the novel to please, please read it, because it is magnificent writing. Don't get put off by the kind of American tenor. Some of you may get put off, but don't, because this is upfront writing. Some people actually, I have had a student who felt he was sanctimonious, and yeah, well, there is an element of that, but then that's part of the persona. He takes the moral high ground, because he is saying that literature is about morality. Literature is a moral quest, and he's spelling that out for you. It's not just literature for the sake of entertainment. It must be doing more than entertaining. This is what he's saying, okay? So in a nutshell, I wanted to sort of put this across to you about Salinger. Yeah, question.
The very word, I mean, morality is like so right. But I mean, I just want to basically,
Morality is not a trite word, sir. For heaven's sake, you can't say morality is.
So
No,
tired of
listen.
morality.
May I just interrupt?
Is that the truth? Is literature all about saying the truth?
Telling the truth and if he takes the moral high ground and he kind of puts himself up as a champion of the truth, that's what I'm saying. So it is a moral stance he takes. It is very definitely, what he's saying is that it is self-indulgent. Somewhere, this is implied, it is self-indulgent to engage just in kind of literature, art for the sake of art. It's not that argument either. It's about having a further higher purpose. Literature having a further higher moral purpose, okay? And the moral purpose is that well, every good writing, every good piece of writing has to have a moral purpose to my way of thinking anyway. I think if it doesn't it doesn't spell it out always, but it has it. The best writing always does, yes.
Sir? So if literature is about morality, then what about some biased writing in literature, which we have observed? When we are talking about biased writing, so do you think it's right for a writing to be biased in literature?
About being what, biased? Biased writing. Sorry, can you clarify the point you're making?
May I just come in? What the hell is wrong with a bias? Of course I have something I want to say, therefore I'm saying it. What's wrong with that, provided I'm very clear about what I'm saying and not hiding it behind something else?
But look, I think perhaps bias is not the right word. Every writer adopts a stance and assumes a persona in order to convey what he wants to. And this is vital for the writer. Because, look, every writer has a message, if you like, has a statement to make. So that statement is going to be his individual statement. It has to, though, represent reality. We were saying earlier about hack writers, about writers who write fiction which does not represent reality. Writers write stories these days. They just write fictions and more little stories that are not taking us anywhere. They're not really conveying anything. I mean, and I don't mean that we should be engaging either in a dialogue with the West, as somewhere Mohsin Hamid does in his book, The Reluctant Fundamentalist, because that's very programmed to my way of thinking. That, to me, could have easily been done in the form of journalism. It's not an aesthetic enterprise. It's not truly an aesthetic enterprise. It doesn't have an aesthetic. He set it up. He says, I met a stranger and and said, I want to tell you my story. And then there's this endless monologue. It's well written. He writes well. But I wish, it weren't so programmed. The whole thing is canned for the West. This is something I have concerns about. Anyway, any more questions? Yes.
I would like to refer to what you said about Salinger adopting the moral high ground in his novel. My question is, after his novel was published, it did create quite a sensation and it did attract a lot of attention. But wasn't he sort of overreaching? And isn't that a sort of over-ambitious position to put a novel in?
I don't think that any writer can ever be over-ambitious. Perhaps Rushdie was over-ambitious. Okay, yeah, Rushdie was over-ambitious in writing satanic verses. There was no need for it. That book was market-driven. He wrote it for economic reasons, and it's a great shame that he had to use a subject that he did use. It wasn't called for because it's an infinitely mediocre novel. It's an infinitely mediocre novel, and I'm afraid, all we did was to build that novel up and to, make it the bestseller, the runaway bestseller it became eventually. So that was our fault because there was this furor about the whole thing, what they call furore these days. There was this furor about it, and it didn't help the Islamic cause, whatever that may mean, at all, but it certainly helped Rushdie. The better books of Rushdie are Shame, which is an excellent book, I think. It's written in the fairy tale genre, and it's very excitingly done, as compared to, now, I will mention Muhammad Hanif now, in this context, an allegory of sorts. Ziaul Haq has been sort of allegorized, as it were. The whole thing is allegorized, and it's wonderfully, very cleverly done. I think it's a splendid novel. It's very impressive, very compelling. It's worth reading also, if you can ever get hold of it. Shame. It's about Bhutto and Zia and that era, and written about Benazir. We can't talk about her in the way that he has in the novel today because she passed on in the most unfortunate way. But anyway, it is, for its period, it was extremely well written and a very exciting novel. So that's my reply to you about ambition. If ambition is of that kind, that variety. Do you get that point? Okay? Thank you. Now I'm going to move on to a very exciting writer here, a writer you all know, probably, I'm sure you all know him, Nabokov. How many have you, can you raise your hands? How many have actually read Nabokov? Okay, one, two, about 5 or 6, not so many. Anyway, I would strongly recommend, because Nabokov is closer, his novels come closer to Pakistan than any other writer I can think of in his own way. The earlier novels, like the ones I'm going to speak of, before Lolita, which I'm also going to speak about, the earlier novels are about totalitarian, ideological, and somewhere theocratic states. I say theocratic states because the state is God in those novels. And when that happens, it becomes nightmarish. And he's created two nightmare worlds in these two novels. They are real nightmare worlds. They're very difficult to read. It's tough reading, but I would recommend strongly, please note the names, Invitation to a Beheading and Bend Sinister, before Lolita. They were written before Lolita, and one was written in roughly 1937, and the other, Invitation to a Beheading, was written roughly towards the end of the 30s, and in 37, I think. And the other one, Ben Sinister, was written or published in 1947. Lolita, as you know, came out much later in 1954, towards the end of the McCarthy era. But these other novels were not published in America. Ben Sinister may have, yes, probably was, but Invitation to a Beheading was published in an emigre journal when Nabokov